Thanks, everyone. Align.org has created and supported the Org Design Conference since its inception here at the conference board. So we're excited to hear from them. And Morgan Stanley Capital International, MSCI, is an investment research firm that provides stock indexes, portfolio risks, and performance analytics and governance tools to institutional investors and hedge funds. Due to the massive growth that MSCI and increasing capabilities that they needed, they proactively anticipated a complicated customer experience. And understanding this, the executive team launched an organization design work to redesign the customer experience from the top to the bottom. So we're going to hear about this from Alejandro Delara, Managing Director, Global HR Lead, Business Partner, and Ken Thompson from Align.org Solutions. Thank you both very much.
Thank you. All right, well, it's a pleasure to be here this afternoon. Thank you to the great crowd. Before we get started, a big shout out to our Google friends. We've had the opportunity to work with them the last couple of years, and they are awesome. They are very, very good at what they do. I challenge you to pick their brains on the break as often as you can. I'd also like to just introduce my team here real quick. So Reed, Todd, Keely, just raise your hands real quick. If you have any questions about what we present today, please reach out to any one of us, and we can probably share some more light on that. And most importantly, I'd like to introduce my friend and client, Alejandro Delara. He has been working with us now for, well, we started talks about 3 years ago on this transformation, but his role has been pivotal. So he's the global head of HR for MSCI. And for some of you, if you aren't familiar with MSCI, who they are, what they do, it's probably one of the biggest, most successful publicly traded companies that you've never heard of. But that's also maybe partly by design, because they're more of a back-end kind of organization. So we're going to share a little bit today about this journey that we went through with MSCI. Actually started in a room similar to this some years ago, and here we are a few years later. Next slide, please. Oh, are we doing that? Thanks. I'm now at the power. Appreciate it. That's why we're a good partnership here.
A good icebreaker.
All right. So first of all, Alex, why don't you go ahead and introduce the MSCI portion?
Yes, of course. So MSCI, it's just basically, as the slide says, a leading provider for investment solutions for all of our clients. And our mission is basically powering investment solutions for a better world. That's what it is. And it goes all the way from an index provider that's globally. We have 350,000 indices that are processed every single day and are released in different time zones all over the world. But it goes beyond that because it's a solution for portfolio management, risk management, how to assess the different markets and the trends that are happening in our economies. We are a team of experts in research, in data, and technology, and that's what we focus ourselves. And definitely, but part of this work and journey that we work with Align.org, with our partners, is basically we're seeing a huge transformation in the market. And it was a transformation from being products-centric to being a client-centric. And that was the main theme that we had in mind that was happening, and we were recognizing it from all levels in the company, and that's where we wanted to go and proceed and move on.
Very good. Thank you. So just a little bit about our organization. We've been around for about 30 years. We specialize in strategy validation, clarification, what capabilities are needed to deliver that strategy, and then most importantly, how to organize your organization to deliver on those capabilities and that strategy. And that's what we're going to share with you, just a couple tidbits about how we did that with MSCI over this last year or so. First of all, this is what we're going to cover today. We'll talk about the journey. This started a few years ago when we became in contact with MSCI. And after just a few short discussions, we found ourselves talking with their president and CEO. This organization's a two-in-the-box leadership thing. So that had its benefits, and it also had its challenges by having a president and CEO, both very powerful, very smart folks, but they weren't always perfectly aligned. Imagine that, right? So managing that dynamic was a challenge, but also helped in many other organizations because they were able to divide and conquer and both be alignment leaders in their own right. One of the things that their CEO said to us as we were beginning our journey, he says, here's what's most important to me. We're a very successful company. We have a machine. It works well. We're profitable. Our shareholders are happy. Our employees are happy. We know our environment industry is changing, and we need to evolve with it, but we have to do it without disrupting the business. And then he goes on to give the analogy. He says, basically what I'm saying is we're going to do significant maintenance on our vehicle while it's also running. And so that was a big part of our challenge and some of our design criteria around is how do we implement this change at a significant magnitude of a product shift to a client-centric shift, all while not disrupting the business. So we'll share a little bit more about a couple of those key areas. We're also going to share one of the tools that we use, actually maybe a couple of the tools, the op model and a little bit of a strategy validation tool, and share with you the actual results. So you're going to see what we actually designed with MSCI here before you. It hasn't been changed or modified. This is part of their strategy. One of the other things too, we hear the term op model a lot, and I think that means a lot of different things to different people. We're going to share a little bit about what it means to us and what it means to MSCI and how we integrated that design into the transformation. And then lastly, Alex is going to talk a little bit about some of the lessons learned, what went well and what would we like to have a redo on if we could go back in time. So Alex, why don't you share with us the business case?
Sure, of course. And so one of the things that we first need to understand is that MSCI has been successful for more than 50 years. So we were part of Morgan Stanley in the past, and then we made the decision in 2008. So the people that MSCI was a cost center. Basically, that's what it was in Morgan Stanley. And then it became a profit center, a complete independent company, and then became public, and that's where the success is. But what is the background of the talented people we had in the company? We are a research company. We understand data, and we provide services and solutions for a better investment for each of our clients. And we are recognized by that in the world. That's our competitive advantage, the research team we have and what goes into that to create risk models. So you can imagine that after being successful, why is MSCI questioning that we need to change, and drastically? Well, that was the big question that was the elephant in the room. Basically, that's what it was. And that's why we came out to, how can MSCI become client-centric? The market was changing. The complications and the complexity of the markets were changing. There are three lenses in the investment industry that we had to look at. The lens of client segments, new client segments growing in the different regions of the world. It's not the same what's happening in the Asia-Pacific region to what is happening in the Americas region or in the EMEA region. Look at the regulations in Europe. Look how increasingly it's getting complex also in the Americas. APAC is going at another pace. It's a very different. So there's different lenses that we had to look at this, and MSCI was built with a product-centric, and that was becoming, or could become for the next 10 years, a blocker in the way we're thinking. So we had to definitely transform all of that. One was client segments as a lens. The other one is different asset classes in the world, how those asset classes combine with the client segments, and then the regional lens. That was what the challenge in front, or that is what the challenge in front of us is. That's why we started, and that's how it became the purpose statement of this work and why we need to think of it differently. But then not only that, a lot of people in the company that have been for tons of years doing an excellent job. We have been successful. We have growth double-digit. And they have positioned MSCI pioneer in a lot of these segments, in risk management, portfolio construction, investment decisions. That's where we have positioned. So now we're questioning that. But we also need to learn how to work differently, because the way we are right now is not going to help us for the next 10 years. So that was the main purpose of all of this work, what we had in mind. And you know, C-suite tends to have very clear ideas and sometimes even blind spots. And getting them there to understand that this is where we're going, and more important, they should be the ones articulating the need, why we needed to change, not us, that we're seeing the day-to-day work and the complications and the complexities. No, they need to do that, and it has to come from them, the thinking. Basically, that's where we focused on in specifically this business case.
Very good, thank you. So knowing that that is the focus, then we said, okay, how are we gonna measure success? And as you can see up here, there's a few things. One is, what is MSCI's new strategy gonna be? What exactly does client centricity mean? There's another term that was often used by leadership about an integrated enterprise called One MSCI. So we kind of had two complementary but somewhat different critical aspects to the way ahead of MSCI. And then we had to determine what capabilities are needed to drive both of those two strategic initiatives. Some of these capabilities currently existed in MSCI, some did not even exist at all, and some were in their early stages. And so how do we prioritize these capabilities? How do we assess them? And then how do we start to integrate them into the organization became our work moving forward. Then there's a whole bunch of other things you see here on box number 2 on the right is how also do we look at all the enablers? How do we look at P&L management, governance and decision rights, roles, the metrics, the leadership and culture. The culture inside MSCI was very significant, very productive. How do we not disrupt it? But there was also some behaviors that were less than optimum that we also wanted to make sure that we influence to drive those kinds of positive behaviors that will then reinforce the strategy. So this was our order at hand, and Alex and I and many other members started to embark upon this journey with this business case in mind. So this is the roadmap that we use, generally speaking. I know it's somewhat vague, but I think it is important because to have a successful organization design, there are many times when sequence matters. And so first of all, one of the things we did, we had a diagnosis component. I won't bore you all the details of what that entailed, but this is really getting to understand the employees, the environment, the current capabilities of the organization, the industry, et cetera. Once we are armed with that data, we then went back with our design team, which consisted of many of the executive leaders and key strategic-minded folks in the organization, and we began to articulate how do we define this strategy? What does that look like? How are we going to be chosen over our competition from a forward-thinking lens? Not next year, we're talking 3, 4, 5 years out from now, so that we can start to build towards those capabilities. So how is MSCI going to win in the marketplace? Once we had that, then it was a matter of saying, okay, let's determine the capabilities needed. I mentioned earlier that we assess them. Now, how do we take those capabilities and turn it into an organization that is fluid, that works, that actually delivers these results that we want it to get? And so this is where we had discussions around the work being done, what structure is needed, what governance is needed, what metrics are needed, all of these typical components that most of us are very familiar with, all of that to reinforce and enable the critical capabilities and the strategy of the organization. We got that done some time ago, and obviously there were some pretty significant areas inside of MSCI that changed quite a bit. And so that's where we go into step number 4, which we call micro-design alignment, where we actually took a particular vertical or a COE and did a deep dive or a double click and went much deeper into the organization to make other organizing choices to reinforce this framework that we just got done building. And so, we call this nesting or whatever, but it's ensuring that these new changes are implemented in a deep manner. And then lastly, we have the realization of sustainability. We're not going to touch on that today, but that is basically making sure that we have alignment leaders and sponsors, that we know what our change management needs are, and we go through the implementation in a proper sequence and timing that doesn't overly disrupt the business. So this was our roadmap for the transformation.
Great. So the first thing that we have to, as part of this journey, and then having a structure of how do we approach it, was to think about what was our current situation, what were the areas that we had to improve, and how we're going to measure that we are successful. At the end, those were the 3 things that we had to be clear. And of course, you can imagine a room full of 10 executive committee members, and each one of them pulling into their own function, responsibility to get there. And of course, C-level suite is always urged to get things done, execute, and move on. But you have to follow a pattern. That's where we came very good brothers and sisters here between Align.org and MSCI to understand and make sure we are being flexible with them and understanding where they come from to where they want to get. This is what explained a lot of our current state of where we are. It was very clear for us that the strategy that the commercial, financial, and operating strategy of MSCI was working. There was no question about that. The thing is that that strategy we will not be able to accomplish it in the next few years. Why? Because the market was changing so fast. And why? Because we didn't have the capabilities inside the company to think and change our mindset, to think differently. You can imagine MSCI structure at the moment in time. If you are product-centric, what happens with that is that you block decisions. You're not agile enough to make decisions on a fast pace and change even the service that you're providing from one month to another, because that's how the market is moving. That fast is going. So if we don't have that structure, governance process, ways of doing it, and the capabilities to do that, we're not going to be able to accomplish. That was exactly the situation that we were facing. And where we needed to improve, well, it starts with even the way we work, the processes we follow, the way we go out to the market and say, this is how we're doing. Are we doing good or are we not doing good? Being a public company, there's regulations that we have to follow, and there's stakeholders that are asking us for specific revenue, run rates, etc. And we cannot go back. We will continue growing at double digit. How do you make that happen at the same time that you're transforming people's mindset, new leaders, changing organization structures, decision-making processes, new operating committees all around, so that we accelerate the pace of how we're working? And trust me, even MSCI is considered like a fast moving executional company. And now we were saying, oh, double that. Oh, okay, how do we do it? Do we have the resources? Do we have the capabilities? Do we have the leadership? Do we have the processes? Do we have the systems? All of those questions were put on the table in order to, that was our business case. That was the situation where we wanted to improve.
Very good. I think I should add all of this, and we did this virtually. This entire transformation was done virtual.
Additional factor.
This is, we've had to do a lot of that lately, right, when things were shut down. And so we did this all virtually, working with teams in a collaborative virtual facilitation environment and doing that. So that was just one more little factor.
A little example. I met Ken physically 4 years ago in this exact forum. And from there, this is the journey that we have gone.
That's right.
But his colleagues or his peers, I met them today. So we finished the project and we just met basically today.
Yeah, in person.
In person.
Yeah. So I want to share with you this tool. Alex and I are going to kind of go over this. If those that are staying for the post-conference tomorrow, we're actually going to talk about this and how to implement it, use it, should you want to do that in much more detail. But this is part of the strategy clarification piece that we did with MSCI. We use the acronym ANCHOR. It helps us capture the key elements of a strategy. I'm not necessarily saying that this is everything you need, but I think it's a good start for good conversations. And so the first piece is the audience. I'll let AJ talk about that here in a minute. Then we have the need. This is kind of your value proposition. This is why you're going to be chosen over your competition based on what's happening with the environment and what results that you want to get. What channels do you want to use to deliver your service or offering a product? And probably the one that is the most often not talked about, most often forgotten in strategies that we come across is this fourth one here called omit. Now, we use the term omit because it blends beautifully with the term anchor, which should anchor an executive team's mindset. But really what this category is trade-offs. It's not always things you're going to stop doing. That is a lot of it. But it's having those trade-offs. In order for you to be amazing at your value proposition moving forward, what are you willing to give up? How do you start saying no to the good ideas and the better ideas that hit your organization? I would argue that the only way you can do that is if you have a benchmark of what the best ideas are. If you can anchor around the best ideas, you can then have conversations with your peers, your colleagues, and so forth on those good and better ideas that come across the table and say, hey, thank you so much for bringing this to our attention. It's a really good idea. Let's shelf it for now, not because it's bad, but because we feel that this other thing is even more important and provide even better results. But let's circle back when the time is right and keep that going. Organizations that don't have that benchmark of trade-offs and omits, we find tend to say yes to almost everything if it's a good idea. Because frankly, how can you not say yes if you don't have a benchmark to assess that good idea against? So omits. We had, these are some up here, but there was actually a lot more than this. I think we had like 20 or so. But these were guiding principles that then help leaders make decisions downstream. And then lastly is the revenue piece. So Alex, why don't you talk about the audience piece for a moment? I'll talk about the need, and we'll go from there.
Oh, for sure. And I'm going to have to emphasize even much stronger the omit, because it was a topic that really moved the needle in the rest of the anchored steps, and especially in defining and making sure the C-level defined what was the audience? Who do we, that was one of the most difficult processes and brainstorming sessions that we had, and it took us a while to get there.
Maybe share just a few of the candidates on who we had discussions about, because there's multiple audiences we could have picked.
Oh, definitely.
Certainly a lot of key stakeholders.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you can imagine, with all of these three lenses that I just mentioned, that I mentioned before that we had to look, it's like, so imagine one of the sales manager or the executive committee member, global head of coverage, telling him, well, you're probably going to have to forget about $100 million of sales because of that segment. Just leave it on the table so that you can focus on these other priorities. That was his eyes. Like, why would I forget? Well, you have to. That's the value of the omit in all of this, because you need to balance. You cannot cover all of it. You have to focus where your strategy is, and therefore define what type of client is. And we came up with this definition that you see here, and this is what it is. But the key question to answer was, who do we need to be loved by? Define that, answer that question. And we made it so practical to make sure they are candidly sharing their ideas. Describe them in number, in revenue, in growth, what size of client it is. And there were three things or three characteristics of who do we want us to love us the most. One of them is, of course, the brand ambassadors, which is these people that are the senior clients. Those clients that bring the most revenue but use MSCI's, most of our products and services, not only one, but two, but four different ones. Those are the ones that are going to be providing ideas how to evolve and how the market is evolving. So we need to be very close for them, because in their space, they are pioneers. In our space, just similar like MSCI, in our space, we're pioneers. Then the other one was defining the brand advocates. And those are the ones that are going to, the ones that are influencing the decision for that senior manager, head of risk, making the decision to go and continue working with us. And finally, the people that do the actual work with them. So those were the three, and we defined them clearly: the size, who they were, what is their investment strategy, who partners much better with MSCI, meaning we're doing partnership, we're building customized solutions for them. They are putting and investing money together with us. That was our definition. But it all came up after answering the question, what are some of the trade-offs that we need to let go, or we will lose focus as we go into this journey for the next 10 years, to give us a framework.
Very good. Thank you for setting that. So as you can see from the end statement, once we understand our audience, is now this is going to be MSCI's superpower moving forward. This is why they are going to be chosen over the competition, is because they do these 5 things better than anybody else. Now, we certainly haven't, at this point, right, we haven't figured out exactly how that's going to happen, the capabilities, the skills, the work, and all that. But we knew that if we were really, really good here, then we would win and dominate in the marketplace. So these are the 5 things that we started to build and organize MSCI around. Now, we're not going to actually do this breakout because of time, but I do want you to just take a moment and think about it. Think of your own organization, and can you clearly articulate what your value proposition is? Why are you going to be, or why are you being chosen over the competition? Because you do what really, really well. Often we like to even think about what would that more ideal statement be if you were in the future? What should that value proposition be 2 to 3 years from now? Because chances are it's going to take that long to really build and integrate those capabilities. And then when you have that in mind, think about what trade-offs should your organization make in order to deliver on that. Is your organization saying yes to a lot of things that are distracting it because they're good ideas when they should be saying no and focus on that superpower? So just a good food for thought here. Now, as we continue to go downstream from this anchor statement, you can see here, we decide to set number 5 aside of their value offerings. We just focus on the top 4. And for each one of these, we built out this metrics like you see here. So we have bolded number 3, and we're saying, okay, in order for this case to have the best-in-class expertise, credibility, industry influence, thought leadership, what does MSCI need to be really, really good at to deliver that? And those are all the things on the right. Now, you'll also see that they're prioritized, and they are assessed in kind of a green, blue, and red. That lets us know where are we today compared to where we need to be. Alex, what would you?
No, I would say that this was the second most important deliverable for the work we did, because for the C-level, it was an eye-opener. It was an eye-opener to assess themselves in terms of the different products and services that we have. And in some segments, we were top-notch, best-in-class, et cetera. And in some, like, we're not doing good. But here, I mean, I just want to point out, I mean, look at the one that is, it's red, which is not, we're deficient in that. It's like, even our marketing strategy was not consistent. How do we go out? And if you go out and ask in the market, what is MSCI? The typical answer that you will hear from everybody, oh, index provider. Oh, hold on. And where is portfolio construction? And where is risk management? Where is the models? Where is ESG and climate? I mean, it definitely resonates that there's something missing. And if in the future we want to continue growing double digit, we need to change and enhance our capabilities. Do we have them? Or we need to go look out for them. And that's what's also important as we define in the anchor statement, that we cannot be excellent in everything. There's other people outside, other companies outside that are much better. But can we do that together? Because at the end, our objective or goal is to provide the best investment solutions. So we don't have to do this by ourselves. So it became so clear for us where we need to focus and prioritize and not try to tackle everything at the same time, which usually they want to do that. So this was, for us, it was clearly one of the second best outcomes of the whole exercise as we were going through.
Thank you. So one of the things that we did downstream from these capabilities that you see up here is we then designed the organization to deliver. That included structure, included how we looked at work, it included data and metrics and so on, governance, decision rights, all of those things to make sure that those capabilities would be delivered inside the organization. One of the things that we did as we started to evolve, then if we have all of these capabilities for each of these different needs or these value propositions, how does that all come together to deliver value? And this is our definition of an operating model. It's showing how you can deliver value to your clients or to your customers, but also shows all the interfaces between all the other parts of your organization, both internal and oftentimes external, how it all comes together to deliver it. Alex, I know we don't have a lot of time, but maybe talk us through the journey.
Yeah, that would be great. I mean, look.
It didn't start off like this, did it?
Oh, no. I mean, we were talking this morning and in having the coffee break, and we're saying, so how many at the end? I mean, it was between 15 and 18 different iterations to arrive here. And this was the final outcome. Right now, you even ask any of the EC members, executive committee members who were part of the design team, and they can talk about it. Before, they didn't. We started really, really basic with boxes. It's like, no, why are you running, directly into the typical flow chart? No, we're trying to break everything here. We're trying to think outside of the box. And with everything that we had learned about the anchor statement and the differentiating capabilities, now put thought into building a different model. Some things are the same way, some things are not. But I want to point out something very interesting that came up from them. If you look at the top right, the box on the top right, it says building blocks. I want to point out about that because I said at the beginning, our goal in this business case was to move from a product-centric organization to a client-centric organization. The EC members, they didn't even want to mention the word product anymore as they were building this. They were already realizing that they had to change even their message and how they're making their decisions. You can see how in the center they immediately put the client and all the process that are around the client to give the best client experience are around there. Everything goes into the client. Every decision we make is because the client, their influencers, their prescribers, their selling, or their servicing input comes from, and then we make a decision. Nothing comes about, outside of it. And then there are factors that get involved as part of all this cycle around the different operating models that we defined.
Very good. We can actually show you pictures of some of the earlier models. It didn't look anything like this. We had linear models, we had handwritten models. It was awesome watching that evolve. So once again, here's a few things that I'd like you to maybe think about. Does your organization have an operating model? Could you draw it out? One of the big advantages is, as Alex mentioned, is when we had an articulated operating model that shows all these interfaces in and outside the organization, that now becomes a point of discussion, a point of training, a point of decision-making for all leaders downstream in the organization, because it shows how all these things should come together ideally to deliver the right results. So back to your organization. Does your organization have something like this? Is there a clear picture there so people in your company can follow this model, make decisions against it, and so forth? All right, we're about out of time, so Alex, why don't you just cover the quick lessons?
The quick lessons we learned, and I mentioned a lot, we mentioned a lot of it during our presentation. Definitely engaging and doing this work with the key executive team of the company is what's going to drive the change. Has to come from there. Their ideas, the ones who have put in place and funded this company and move ahead and produce the double digit, they have to be part of this and they have to own it. It was not easy to get them there, and especially working for 6 months in all of this work to do over and over and iterations, and of course, pulling strings all the way to this, and definitely partnering with somebody like Alain Ord, who understood us and was able to be flexible in changing the way we think as MSCI to adapt the methodology that they had or they were proposing us. That was key as part of our learning experience, definitely. And this is a journey that is not going to end there. After this macro design organizational changes, as we have had already in this year 5 as part of the evolution of this, but now teaching individually the different functions that we have transformed, how to do it. That's the lessons that we have done, and the flexibility to be open for anything. So that was great.
All right.
Thank you.
Do we have time for questions or? Okay. Well, please.
We talk too much.
Yeah. Please come and see Alex. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.